Every 4 years, citizens of the United States vote for the person they want to become the next president. However, the electoral process is built in a way that makes it so that your individual vote doesn't really count. This video will try to inform you about the confusing U.S. electoral process. Before we can vote for who will be president, we must first decide who the candidates are. This process is called the primaries. The first part of the primary is that individuals must declare that they wish to run to become either the Democrat or Republican candidate for president. These individuals must demonstrate that they would have people interested in voting for them, and this is indicated by the amount of money that supporters donate for their bid for candidacy. These primary candidates begin campaigning by telling the people what they stand for and what their platform is. A platform is a list of values and actions that he or she will support if he or she becomes president. The candidates of each party have debates with one another so that the public can decide which candidate they will vote for in the primary elections. Each state holds a primary or a caucus. Caucuses were the original method for choosing a candidate, which dates to the election of the second president of the United States. Very few states still hold caucuses. A caucus is where people gather in a room to discuss and decide together who they want to be the candidate of their political party. There are two types of primary elections: open and closed primaries. In an open primary election, a voter can vote for either the person they want to be the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate. You cannot cast a vote for both the Democrats and the Republican candidates. In a closed primary election, voters can only vote for the candidate in the party they are registered with, either Democrat or Republican. Every state has its own laws about who can vote in a primary election. Some states require that voters can show a state-issued identification. Some states require that you register to vote at a federal building. And some states allow people to register to vote online. Only U.S. citizens and people who have a green card are allowed to vote. States hold their primaries or caucuses on predetermined dates. The first state to vote has long been Iowa in February, and the last states to vote hold their primaries in June. Each state has a certain amount of delegates. The amount of delegates each state has is based on the population of the state. When you vote in the primary, you are not voting directly for the candidate. You are voting for your delegate to represent your vote. These delegates will represent the vote of the people at the party's convention, which I will explain in a moment, but a delegate can change their vote at the convention. This means that the delegate from a state might not represent the people's votes. The Republican and the Democrat assign delegates differently. Delegates for the Democrats are based on the percentage of people voting for a candidate. For example, let's say a state has 10 delegates and there are 3 candidates running. Democrat A gets 30% of the vote. Democrat B gets 50% of the votes. And Democrat C gets 20% of the votes. That would mean from that state, Democrat A gets 3 delegates, Democrat B gets 5 delegates, and Democrat C gets 2 delegates. Different states assign their delegates differently for the Republican candidates. Some states are proportional like the Democrats, but some states go by a winner-take-all method, where the candidate with the majority of votes gets all the delegates from that state. There are other ways candidates can be chosen that is not represented by the vote of the people. The Democrats have a number of superdelegates. A superdelegate is a person who is an important member of the Democratic Party, such as leaders, elected officials, and lobbyists. These individuals can cast votes at the Democratic National Convention for the individual they want, and their vote does not reflect the will of the people. A superdelegate's vote holds the same weight as the proportional delegates that are voted on by the people. The Republicans have something similar. They call these individuals unpledged Republican National Committee member delegates. They are supposed to vote for the candidate that was popular in the state that they are from. Both the Republican candidates and the Democratic candidate must win a majority of the delegates from their party to win the party's nomination for a presidential candidate. For Democrats, the number of elected delegates is 4,051, and the number of superdelegate votes is 712 for a total of 4,763 delegates. A Democratic primary candidate must win 2,383 delegates to be the presidential candidate. For the Republicans, the total of delegates available is 2,472, and a Republican primary candidate must receive 1,237 delegates to be the presidential candidate. After the primary and caucus voting process has ended, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party each hold a convention where the delegates that have been elected from their states come and place their vote for the candidate that they represent. At this time, the delegates from certain states with unique rules about how delegate votes are governed have the right to change who they represent. This is also where the superdelegates and unpledged delegates declare who they support. As mentioned previously, for a candidate to win party nomination, they must receive the required number of delegate votes. Most of the time, there are no surprises at a convention, because it is clear which candidate has met the required delegate votes before the convention begins. However, sometimes there is no clear winner of the primary process because no one candidate has received the required number of delegate votes. If this happens, the convention is said to be an open convention. At this time, the delegates no longer have to represent the candidate to whom they are pledged. The party leader of the political convention makes a call for each state to cast its delegate vote. The winner is declared, and the candidate makes a speech to accept the party nomination to represent their party in the national election. Lots of other people make speeches too. The conventions are giant, expensive affairs that cost a lot of money, much of which is paid by the taxpayers. After the party nominees have been declared at the national conventions, the presidential race begins. Every once in a while, a candidate who is not supported by the Republican or Democratic parties will join the race at this point. Each candidate continues to appear in public and make speeches about why you should vote for them. The presidential candidates have debates against one another, so you know what their ideas are about how to run the country. On the second Tuesday in November, citizens will go to the polls, mail in their ballots, or whatever their particular state has decided to do about voting, to cast their vote for the candidate of their choice. They check the box by the name of the candidate, but really they are voting for the electoral college member to vote for that candidate. There are 538 total electors. Each state has a number of electors that will represent the votes from that state. The number is equal to how many House representatives your state has, plus 2 that represent the 2 senators that every state has. To win the presidency, a candidate needs 270 electoral votes. Electoral votes from any state is awarded to the candidate that won the majority of the citizen votes in their state. This means that winner takes all applies in all states. This means that a candidate could lose the popular vote, but win the required number of electoral votes to become president. This happened when George W. Bush beat Al Gore, even though he did not win the popular vote. There are some states who have so many electoral college votes that just by winning a few of these states, the candidate could win. The Founding Fathers created the electoral process because they thought uneducated people wouldn't be able to make a smart vote, and thus a charismatic but bad leader could come to power. In conclusion, the American government should really make the electoral process more representative of the popular vote and not the vote of the larger states.